Hello everyone and welcome to my final video talking about Godzilla's co-stars in Godzilla King of the Monsters. And I figured we'd save the biggest for last, that being King Ghidorah, the King of Terror, the Golden Demise, the Great Destroyer. King Ghidorah, Godzilla's arch nemesis. And when I heard that this movie was being done, and they were going to be including Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, immediately, myself and all other Godzilla fans all said the exact same thing. Ghidorah is going to be the main antagonist of this film. There's no way that this film isn't going to be set up to where Ghidorah is the main bad monster and Godzilla and potentially Mothra and Rodan as well have to take him down as a repeat of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster from 1964. And that is the status that King Ghidorah has earned during his time and his many appearances throughout the Godzilla series. Now, they say that all great heroes need a great adversary to overcome, and they need a nemesis. They need an arch rival. Batman has the Joker, Superman has Lex Luthor, the Avengers have Thanos, Godzilla has King Ghidorah, and the two are just linked together. And whenever Ghidorah is featured in a Godzilla movie, it feels like a big deal, and it feels appropriate because Ghidorah is the big bad, and that's just how it is. And again, I talked about this in the Rodan video, but when you look at the big icons of Toho's monster library, Ghidorah is very near the top, probably number 3 behind Godzilla and Mothra. And that design is just so distinct and so unique. And it was the first time, because he debuted in 1964, and it was the first time that Toho really thought outside the box for a monster design. Because prior to that, it was mostly giant robots and giant dinosaurs. Mothra was a little bit of a break from that with more cutesy-looking butterfly type. And you had a few giant insects as well with the Meganula from the original Rodan film. But for the most part, they kept it pretty much to dinosaurs and robots and that type of stuff. So Ghidorah, being an alien creature, they went all out. And obviously inspired by mythological dragons, they ended up settling on this giant, 3-headed, 2-tailed golden dragon that shoots lightning out of his mouth. Specifically called the gravity beams. Gotta make that distinction there. But, it's funny, because I've seen, behind-the-scenes notes on what was originally planned for Ghidorah's design, and apparently he was supposed to have rainbow-colored wings. So the golden dragon that we ultimately got wasn't the original intention. I think we ended up with the better design because I can't picture Ghidorah. I've seen a few fan photos of with Ghidorah with the original coloring that they intended, and it just doesn't look right. It's like, no, he's got to be a golden dragon. That's how I like my Ghidorah, and that's the way he should always be. And, he first appeared in, like I said, 1964's Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, and that was a significant film for me because it was the 4th Godzilla movie I ever saw. And up to this point, I had seen King Kong vs. Godzilla, then I saw Godzilla Raids Again, and then I saw Godzilla vs. The Thing, also known as Mothra vs. Godzilla, and I was disappointed that Godzilla just kept losing. But Godzilla was also the bad monster in every film, so he kind of had to lose. So when I saw this film when I was a kid, I was kind of like, had my fingers crossed, I was like, please let Godzilla win this time, please let Godzilla win this time. And in this movie, we have that classic scene where Mothra sits down and has a talk with both Godzilla and Rodan and convinces them to put their differences aside, and they all join forces to fight King Ghidorah, and ultimately they do. So Godzilla, for the first time in his career, becomes the heroic monster and helps drive King Ghidorah away from planet Earth. And that started Godzilla's development from destroyer to protector that would take place throughout the course of the original series. And it took King Ghidorah to kind of start that transition. Turns out that as much of a destroyer as Godzilla was, there were actually worse things out there. And as the series progressed and there were greater threats out there, Godzilla became more and more of a guardian to planet Earth rather than one of its enemies. And, Godzilla's movie career probably would have been very different had King Ghidorah not entered into it. It's very interesting. It's one of those things. I wonder what would have happened if King Ghidorah had never been introduced. What would have happened if they never made that movie where Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan joined forces against him? I don't know. I think the Godzilla series would have been a lot shorter, to be perfectly honest, because how many times can you have the bad monster lose in every film. So I think Ghidorah was a key element in Godzilla's character development, and ever since then has been a big part of Godzilla history. And like I said, every time he's included in a film, it feels like a big deal. And I look back at all of his other appearances. Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. He was in the climactic battle of Destroy All Monsters. He was in the climactic battle paired with Gigan in Godzilla vs. Gigan. All big deals, and then you get to the new series, and to show how big of a deal King Ghidorah really was, he was the first monster that got to come back to the Godzilla series after the reboot. Originally, they tried Biollante. They didn't get the box office out of that film that they wanted, so they decided to go back and bring back old monsters for Godzilla to fight. And the first one on the list was King Ghidorah. And boy, oh boy, did that film deliver quite the doozy with time travel elements and all this other stuff. But in that movie, we get to see King Ghidorah basically steal Godzilla's origin, which, that really kind of intensified the status of Ghidorah as Godzilla's arch rival. And that film was also interesting because of the constant role reversal, because originally it was Ghidorah's the destroyer and Godzilla's the hero, and then they switch where Godzilla becomes the destroyer, and then Mecha King Ghidorah, which was a very nice climactic little touch to give us a cyborg version of King Ghidorah that's actually an Earth protector. So we got that new monster involved, and made for a thrilling climax to that film. A very, very exciting and crazy entry to the Godzilla series. But I think that movie did a lot to elevate Ghidorah as well, and also told Toho, it's like, oh hey, we can bring these monsters back and fans will be excited about it. And from there, we got Mothra back, we got Mechagodzilla, we got Rodan, we got the Son of Godzilla, but not at the expense of getting new monsters, because aside from that, like I said, we got Mecha Ghidorah, we got Batra, we got Space Godzilla, we got Destroya. So it was nice that Toho was able to find that balance between bringing back the old monsters and creating new ones. And Mecha Ghidorah in particular was a great example of that, where it's like taking a classic idea and updating it for a great new monster. It made for an excellent climax. So Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, I think, is one of the bigger entries in the series, and a big reason for that is King Ghidorah himself. And from there, he would actually go on to be only the second monster in the Godzilla series to cross out of the Godzilla series once they were entered into it. The first being Mothra. Mothra got her own film, and Rodan had her own film, but once they got crossed into the Godzilla series, typically they stayed there. They didn't get any more standalone films. Mothra was the exception, where Mothra was able to get her own trilogy in the 90s, and in the third film, Grand Climax, final film, they put her up against King Ghidorah, and I thought that was a great use of King Ghidorah, and actually one of my more favorite versions of King Ghidorah, because most of the time, the three-headed little dragon is a tool of alien invaders to destroy the planet, whereas in the original film, he was like this mythological destroyer that got unleashed on the planet Earth. And I think his portrayal in Mothra 3, despite some of my issues that I have with that film, their portrayal of King Ghidorah is great because he is the antagonist of that film. There's no aliens controlling him. He is a god wreaking havoc on planet Earth and trying to eliminate all the children of the human race. And before that, he killed all the dinosaurs. So he even has a history of being quite the genocidal monster there. So I thought that was a great use of King Ghidorah, and actually kind of expanded on his capabilities. Oh, well, he's not just an arch rival to Godzilla. He can be an arch rival to Mothra as well. And as I said in the Mothra video, Mothra is the ultimate symbol of good among the Toho monsters, and if there's an ultimate symbol of evil among the Toho monsters, it's King Ghidorah. So mixing the two, I thought, was a great idea, and made Mothra 3 a little bit more interesting than probably the other two films that preceded it. And from there, Ghidorah would make a few more appearances. He would show up in GMK as a protector, probably his most bizarre role, probably the weakest use of King Ghidorah, I would say. But they included him for the sake of box office appeal, so to that end it worked, but not my favorite portrayal of the character. And we saw a different version of him in Final Wars called Kaiser Ghidorah, which was a four-legged version that evolved from Monster X. I go back and forth on whether or not I even count that as King Ghidorah, to be honest, but it's still nice to see Godzilla in his final battle on the 50th anniversary before the series takes a break. It's cool to see him fight with King Ghidorah, at least a version of King Ghidorah one more time. But Prior to Godzilla King of the Monsters, we did get one more unique portrayal of King Ghidorah with the Golden Demise, the Planet Eater King Ghidorah that we saw in the anime trilogy. Now, I had my misgivings about the anime trilogy, and I had many problems with the anime trilogy. I didn't like how Mothra was ultimately handled. I didn't like how Mechagodzilla was handled at all. I thought they didn't follow through on a lot of the good ideas that they really had. But one monster, aside from Godzilla, that actually turned out really well in the anime trilogy was King Ghidorah. And I did not expect to like that version because I saw where they were going with it, where it's basically just 3 gigantic snake heads that come out of portals in the sky, and it has a non-comparable, non-physical form, and is able to attack Godzilla and drain his energy and do all sorts of weird stuff. And it had a very Lovecraftian kind of Cthulhu kind of feel to it, and very apocalyptic. And at first I thought it was like, oh, it's a flying spaghetti monster. That looks stupid. But as I watched the movie, that actually kind of won me over. So for all my misgivings with the trilogy, at least they presented an evolved, unique version of King Ghidorah that actually kind of worked for me, and built off the idea that he's a world destroyer, and that whole like vengeful god idea with King Ghidorah. And it looks like we're getting the vengeful god King Ghidorah in Godzilla King of the Monsters. And if there's any monster I'm really excited to see, Rodan, I was gushing all over. It's like, I'm so happy that Rodan's in this thing, but I really want to see what they do with King Ghidorah here, because he's clearly being, for all intents and purposes, this movie, and yes, Mothra's in it, yes, Rodan's in it, but it's being sold basically as Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. Like, they're the two main rivals of this film, and I really want to see what they do with King Ghidorah. The early reactions of the film have been very positive, and the scale and the monsters have gotten a lot of praise, so that makes me think King Ghidorah must have been pretty amazing, because some of the imagery that they've already accomplished with King Ghidorah have been amazing, especially that one shot of him on the volcano with the cross in the forefront. I'm like, that looks so awesome. And I expect a lot of that stuff in the film when I ultimately see it. So, yeah, I am super stoked to have King Ghidorah back. It's so cool to be seeing him and Mothra and Rodan in an American big-budget Hollywood film alongside Godzilla. And hopefully this film opens up the door for more monsters from Toho's library to come in and be involved in Legendary Pictures' Monsterverse. We've got Godzilla vs. Kong on the horizon, but hopefully, if these movies continue after Godzilla vs. Kong, we can get more. And hopefully, very much like he was in the Heisei series in the 90s, I think maybe King Ghidorah could help be a gateway to making the Monsterverse a lot more fun and a lot more exciting. So, fingers crossed, here's hoping, and here's hoping that King Ghidorah proves to be a very destructive and effective antagonist for the King of the Monsters, Godzilla. I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it. But that concludes this video. Thank you all for watching. The hype train for Godzilla King of the Monsters continues. Toot toot. But that is all I have for you now. I've got one more video before the movie's release that I'm going to give to you guys, but you'll be getting that tomorrow. But until then, later, everybody.